Hey guys, absolutely great to have you here today. In this video, we're going to talk about a very big myth out there in regards to the hips in the golf swing. And that myth is if we use our hips aggressively, if we open our hips too early in the downswing, what ends up happening is we get stuck, the club gets behind our body. Some people may call this a hip spinner, and then we're going to hit those blocks out to the right. Now that actually isn't the case, and I'm going to get over why that is here in a second. And then we're going to do a great before and after with a good friend of mine and someone I've been working with on their golf swing, Michael Durr. We're going to show some great improvement he had, how he improved his face and path control with his swing, and also hit some more accurate drives after making this change. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first let's tackle this myth that if we start to rotate our hips open that we're going to get stuck and block it out. Well, the first thing we need to know is that the top players, which I'm going to show you here in a little bit, all get their hips open at impact. PGA Tour average is around 45 degrees. Some players get as much as 60 degrees open with the hips as they're coming into contact, and that helps you to release in front. And it really doesn't have much to do with getting stuck in the swing. Where getting stuck comes from is when we get this club steep early in the transition. Now, as my hands continue to swing down, the center of mass of this golf club is going to want to fall under late in the swing if I get steeper in the early transition. So if I start my downswing and I'm very steep with this club, as I continue down, look how that club has to shallow out. If I took the butt end of this club and just looked the direction that's swinging, it would hit somewhere down here by my feet. Having the ball out here somewhere, that club naturally has to shallow under, and that club falls under this way. The face opens up, it gets stuck in behind us, and we have a tough time squaring the club face up. So that being the case, if we're getting stuck, that has more to do with shallowing that club out early, which is what we call the move in the Top Speed Golf system. So that's a very important thing to know. When we're spinning our hips open, if we start down steep and now really aggressively start to spin open, then that club could get stuck. But even if I slow my hips down, let's say I keep my hips closed, I keep my shoulders closed and this club is steep, well then I'm just having to push all arms and body across my body, and I'm going to miss out on some speed. So in a nutshell, the steepness of the club in the early transition is what's going to cause you to get stuck, not the hips and body. If I shallow this club out, square this club face up early by starting to rotate it like we talk about in the move, then I can rotate on through as hard as I want to, just like the top pros. So that's the myth out there, is that we need to keep our hips closed, we need to keep our shoulders closed. That way we can keep this club working in front of our body. I have to tell you, I believed that for a while, and it wasn't until researching a lot longer into the swing that I realized that that's just not what the pros are doing. So now let's talk about Michael, who had this problem in his swing. So you'll notice in his video here, as he starts down, he's seeing that his hips and shoulders are fairly closed. If we go at impact and pause right at impact, his hips aren't very open there. Remember, we want him to be about 45 degrees open, and his shoulders are fairly closed also. Now the problem with that is he's going to have to use a lot of hands and arms, which you'll notice also in his swing. As his hips and shoulders slow down, he has to use his hands and arms. And go ahead and try this out. Stand up in your living room right now if you're watching this video. If you're outside, grab a club and make a couple practice swings for me. Keep your hips and shoulders very close, so feel like they're pointing back here behind the ball, and then try to swing on through. What you're going to notice is your arms have to keep the club moving on through, and they're kind of flipping past your body, so it's going to cause a little bit more of a flip. You'll notice with him how his right arm kind of flies out away from his body. His shoulders are very level with the ground. So instead of staying in his posture with his shoulders, having those shoulders work under, now his shoulders are leveling out, and he's using a lot of hands and arms to square up that face. So if you imagine, if I'm using my hands and arms, take a look at this club face, how it's going from very open and then closing very quickly, and that right arm kind of flies out away from the body. That can lead to a lot of inconsistency because the club face is closing so fast. All right, so now let's take a look at the pros. Now you'll notice here, when we look at Rory McIlroy, look how open those hips are. When you get those hips open, now everything's clearing more out to the target. That club is releasing in front, and we can accelerate that club through the golf ball a lot more easily. Look at players like Dustin Johnson, look at Adam Scott. Some of the best ball strikers in the world are all quite a bit open in their golf swing at impact. So let's now talk about, we know, okay, the best players are getting open. If we don't get open enough with our body, we're going to have to push with the hands and arms and flip the club past our body. We're going to struggle with forward shaft lean on the irons. We're going to struggle with consistency in the face and the path. So now how do we do that? Well, I'm going to break it down for you piece by piece. We're going to start from the feet. We're going to move all the way up through the body, and we're going to talk about the differences between a closed hips and shoulders in the swing and open, and what you're going to feel when you're doing this. So let's start from the feet themselves. And I'm going to go ahead and just put a T in the ground here so I can swing and clip that. That would be where my golf ball is. Let's start from the right foot. So if my right heel stays on the ground very long in the golf swing, you'll also notice this with Michael's video. If my right heel stays down all the way through contact, and I keep my hands moving forward into the release without lifting that heel, my hips lock up. They can only open so much, just a little tiny bit. And then again, I'm having to use my arms and hands to get that club moving on through. So as the longer that heel stays down, the more likely I am to have closed hips, the more likely I am to flip the club and to push it with my hands and arms. So early in the transition, we want to feel like we're unweighting that right heel a little bit. The knee's going to come forward, and when you're just about halfway in the downswing, that's when you're going to start to see a little bit of air under your right heel. As you continue on to contact, PGA Tour average is about an inch or two of that right heel coming up off the ground. And then even more importantly, as you rotate on through, that heel has to really come up at this point. So as we get to that straight line release, or when we release the club fully in the golf swing like we talk about in the Top Speed Golf system, that heel should definitely be coming on up. And as you rotate all the way on around, nothing but the toe should be on the ground. Second piece here is, let's take a look at your left ankle. If I'm coming on through this shot, if my foot stays square with the camera, so if I go ahead and keep my left foot pointing forward and I keep it there all the way through the swing, no way I can really open my hips. That's not what the pros are doing. What the pros are doing is they're going ahead and letting that heel come off the ground. The foot is opening up. And I've looked at almost every single PGA Tour player, and they all open this front foot as they come into the follow through and come all the way around. Some players even get it a completely 90 degrees open. Players that don't get it open very much, like a guy like Jordan Spieth, what you end up having to do is you still open it a little bit, but then the foot rolls like that. And that could be a little bit harmful on the ankle. It's a lot easier to go ahead, open that foot up at address, then you're unlocking your left hip. You can go ahead and swing on through, open up those hips much more easily. If you're going to start with the foot square, we definitely need to let that come on around like you're seeing with the top pros with their foot action, their left foot action in the swing. Now let's talk about the hips. This is a fairly easy one to check. As we're about halfway into the downswing here, I want my hips to go ahead and be squaring up. My belt buckle's almost facing to the golf ball there. And then to ensure I come all the way around, I want my belt buckle to be facing the target in my follow through. If I go ahead and have my belt buckle facing here in the follow through, again, I'm all arms, I'm flipping that club. I'm not really going to get to that great finish. So I really want to let that rotate all the way around. If I can do that in the finish, it's a lot easier to get in the correct position at impact. So when we take it a step from there, let's look at our shoulders. And a lot of times people will talk about, I want to get my shoulders more closed to promote a draw. It's not really what the best pros are doing. If you look at some players, Rory McIlroy sometimes, I've seen him with his shoulders as much as 45 degrees open at contact. Very, very open with those shoulders as he's coming through there. And again, very open with the hips. We don't have to get that much, but a key checkpoint here is as you come to contact, if you're looking at a video of your swing, I want those shoulders either square or 20 degrees open. Kind of in that range is pretty normal for the best players in the world. Again, that's really going to allow you to come through that ball. If we're looking at our rib cage, this is pretty interesting. So as I'm hitting toward the camera here, if my shoulders are pretty square, a little bit open, if I take my left arm off this club, notice how my rib cage is actually very open. It only looks more square because my left arm is kind of protracted across my body and attaching to this club. So if I take that left arm off of there, now I can see my rib cage is a lot more open. You have this sensation, if I was going to grab a golf ball and I was going to toss it toward the camera, I would open up my body and toss it right to you. Same thing in the golf swing. I want to open my body like I'm going to toss this club or toss that golf ball down the fairway. That's really going to help you to open up even more. Finally, let's talk about this golf club. Now I'm only going to touch on this a little bit, but this is very important to pair up with this, which is what we call the move. So as I come into my downswing, I need to make sure I shallow this club out. If I can shallow that club out early and start to square that face, Now from there, I can rotate as hard as I want to on through that shot, and I'm still gonna hit it pretty nice and straight. Where we get into trouble is if we get steep. Now we open up like those pros and the club's getting stuck behind us. The pros are shallowing that club out, squaring that face up early, and now you can rotate through absolutely as hard as you want to. You're gonna really be cranking the ball out there. So that said, let's take a look at Michael's video now, the after video. So if you look on the side of your screen, one side of your screen, you're gonna see the before video, again, very square with the hips. If you look at the after video, we'll see that his hips are very open. He's coming on through, you'll notice his left arm doesn't kind of fly off his body as much. He's staying in his posture a lot better rather than coming out with his shoulders level like he was in the first video. And really hitting the ball a lot more consistent and having a lot more accuracy doing that. And he has a ton of power. He can swing the club over 130 miles an hour. So if he starts to pair up that consistency with the great speed, he's going to be able to do some great things. Here's what Michael had to say about it.
So I was working through the swing system and I got to the straight line release section and really noticed that my release was happening really soon. And I kind of determined that this is a big reason why I was having some big misses that came out of nowhere. And after working with Clay a little bit and getting, really my hips opened up a lot more, I noticed that I had a lot more control over my swing because my impact position was longer. I was staying through impact much longer, and this was not only allowing me to have much better contact and control over my shapes, I was catching everything good. Even if I was catching a little thin or a little fat, my balls were still getting most of their distance and everything was just working so much better just by working through that straight line release. Knowing that I had to get my hips open to get it released more out in front, it just makes all the difference in the world.
All right, so for those of you that are members of the website, it is time to put this to action. There's a couple things that you really need to work on there. Number one, like we talked about, we want to make sure that we get that club to shallow out. So go to the move section of the website. You're going to go from your home page, go to instruction, Top Speed Golf System, and then scroll on down to the move section. That's going to help you to shallow out that club, square up the face early, really walks you through it step by step. There's several videos in there. If you do those drills, it's going to start to come really, really naturally. That's going to be great to pair that up with these open hips that we're doing today. As you go out to practice on this opening the hips more, do 20, 30, as many as it takes you to get comfortable with this move, just slow motion, pausing in your living room, feeling like you're coming more open, feeling like you're going to be able to open your body and almost toss that club down the fairway. Now, if you really want to learn this move for yourself, I've got a great bonus. We talked about opening the hips up here today, but we have to pair that up with shallowing that club and squaring it up early. If we can put those two together, we're going to be hitting some great shots, and we're going to have that great technique just like the pros do. I have an awesome bonus video for you. It's one of the best drills in the move, talking about how we shallow out that club, and it's the tennis racket drill. I'm going to play a preview of that here in a second. Just go ahead and click the card on your screen or click the link down below in the description. You'll get started on the move, pairing that up with what we learned today with opening the body, and man, you're really going to put that 1-2 punch together. You guys are going to be playing some great golf. Let's go ahead and get started.
Good player problems. We're going to talk about shallowing that club shaft out as we're starting down, as we're doing this rotating of the face that we worked on in the last video. As we start this downswing, what you'll see with basically all of the top players is instead of coming kind of over the top and letting the hands come out away from their body, letting the club come out away from their body, again coming down steep into the ball and then having to open up, kind of fillet open the face and add loft to it. The flattening of the shaft should happen as soon as we start down. So as we start this downswing, what we want to have happening here, you can imagine that if I draw a line from the hosel of my club up through my right elbow, that's my swing plane line, my elbow plane. As I go to the top of the swing, I'm going to be slightly above that. And then as I start down, I want my hands to start to shallow out. I want the club to shallow out inside of this elbow plane. And at the same time, I'm going to be rotating my hand.